Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO at Next Gen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, a big thanks to our three fantastic sponsors. Allflex, part of MSD, perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia, offers one of New Zealand and Australia's largest livestock product portfolios with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heininger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heininger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. ProA Livestock Equipment have been delivering industry-leading livestock handling systems to producers across Australia, New Zealand and beyond for the last 25 years to improve on-farm safety, efficiency and profitability. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now, it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. If you're like me, you're getting pretty excited about now as this podcast is going out. We should all be on our way towards Adelaide, moving towards a Lambex. This one will go out a couple of days before Lambex, so it's I'll be, by the time this is live in your ears, I'll be definitely in South Australia and gearing up for what's going to be a fantastic week for the sheep industry. Really looking forward to that. So I hope to catch up with lots of you there. Make sure you come and find me at the Next Gen Agri site. We're there with Weatherby Scientific and SwabTech, so come and find us and have a catch up. That'll be fantastic. This week on the show, we welcome Josh Barton. Josh manages the commercial sheep at Hillcroft Farms, as well as heavily involved in the measurement and the management of the stud sheep there at Hillcroft Farms, the ultra whites. He's been there for pretty much a decade now, and a really great chat with what he's seen change over those years, as well as his early career and some good tips for young people getting into the industry. It's great to talk to Josh and talk through how he's sort of structured his career and the learning that he's put together and what he's finding in the sheep and their management, and how he's sort of evolving a management system around the genetics and around making sure we're making the most of all of the opportunities. So we'll get underway with that one now. Welcome, Josh, to Head Shepherd.
Thanks, Ferg. Thanks for having me on the critically acclaimed podcast.
Critically by whom? But anyway.
Just what I'm hearing, not from me, of course.
No, exactly. Thanks, mate. No, great to have you here. And I guess we're going to talk about your place of work a fair bit, Hillcroft Farms, but we want to start, back before that, and how you ended up working there at Hillcroft Farms, your time at Murdoch, and how you ended up interested in animal science and ag generally.
Yeah, sure. So born and bred in the southwest of WA, around just out of the Bunbury region, really. So it's about 2 hours south of Perth. Did all my schooling down there, not off a farm. Then I went to university and did ag science up there. My dad was heavily involved in agriculture all his life, still is. He's a freeze branding on cattle, putting numbers on cattle, that sort of job. And so I sort of tagged along with him and worked a lot with cattle, actually. Bugger all the sheep until about 2006 when we started up a sheep milking business. Did that for about maybe 10 years. So that was my first introduction to sheep. Then university after high school. Had a gap year in between there where I worked in the cattle yards and in a farm merchandise branch. Got a bit of exposure there, and then I thought, I do want to do ag science at uni. Did that at UWA. Still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go plants, animals, but cropping seemed to bore me a bit, and animals seemed to be quite interesting. So I went that path towards the latter end and ended up doing honours, still under UWA, but through Murdoch. They just had by far the best projects for animal production, and got lucky enough to work with Dr. Peter McGilchrist, who was just fantastic. I really can't speak highly enough of him, but I don't want to speak too highly, or his head won't fit through the next door. But
he struggles getting around rooms these days anyway, mate. So.
But no, I learned a lot there, and I really enjoyed it. And that was on looking at the intramuscular fat, shear force, and lean meat yield breeding values, and how it affected on farm production and carcass traits. So that was really, really good. And then, out of uni, couple of years on a sheep farm about now from where I am now. That was merino based. I think we had about 20,000 acres there, and there was about 12,000 ewes. Yeah, it just was meant to be as a bit of a farmhand slash assistant farm manager. But he left after the first 2 weeks, so I don't know if that had anything to do with me or or, or what. But
Don't take it personally.
Yeah, I didn't take it too personally. But and after 6 months of just babbling along with the general manager and me, the owner said to me, "Well, you're not what we're looking for, but you'll do." So worked my way through that, and it's advice I've heard all my life, mate. My parents said it to me as well. So it's all good, but learnt a lot there, and learnt a lot that I didn't realise I was learning at the time, as experience just teach you. And then just before Christmas of 2016, I think I saw an opportunity at Hillcroft Farms, and I'd heard of Dawson. I actually met him at that Lamix of that year in Albury, him and Greet, and didn't know much about them, but knew they were a pretty good operation. So I thought I kind of want to learn from the best, you know. But I didn't realise sort of where he sat in the whole industry, which was a bit naive of me. And liked what I saw and thought, yep, I'll sign up. And I guess the rest is history. So,
is that a decade there at Hillcroft?
End of the year will be, yeah. So
yeah,
probably long service, and I'll be out of there, Mark, I reckon.
Yeah, I'd say, mate. Yeah. 3 months on the beach, that'd be good.
Just got to find the beach, yeah.
Excellent, mate. So 10 years at Hillcroft, and as you say, obviously a pretty progressive family between the two Dawsons and their families. Well, Dawson Greet and Dawson and Lisa and all the crew. Yeah, I guess we want to talk. We've sort of had Dawson on before, and we'll probably do it again. And we haven't had young Dawson yet, but that's certainly on the cards. But I'd be keen to talk production, and I guess what you've obviously running ultra whites there, and you will have seen the progression of that breed. When you started, that would have been kind of relatively early days, probably halfway through their development. So you would have seen a lot change in the breed as the sort of it became more stabilised, and that would have been an interesting transition. I guess we want to end up bouncing around a bit, but end up on the HF plus gene, because you would have, if you've been there 10 years, it would have been just going in about when you got there, and sort of starting to see it's the fruits of that effort about now. So it's been an interesting journey. But talk to us about, I guess what you've seen in the sheep change over those times, and then we'll talk through the management that's gone with that.
Yeah. So it's, when you think back to, like I say, 2017, first year on the farm there, they were sort of half shed, pretty good carcasses already. Like I think there'd been about 10 years, or probably 11 years of breeding into them already. Started obviously in 2005, and they played around with a couple of breeds before settling on the White Dorper Pole Dorset mix, and probably took a couple of years of that mix to work out how much of each they wanted. That's about 75% White Dorper, 25% Pole Dorset, just because of the wool. Primarily, the wool was very hard to get off. But still a lot of structural issues to fix with shoulders and feet, and even the heads were sort of very inconsistent. Of course, at the time I was looking at them going, oh, these are pretty bloody useful sheep, you know what I mean? Like, we'll do all right out of this, and we don't have to crutch and shear. So, but you just look back at them now, what they were and what they are now, you think, oh my God, we had a half-finished product at best. And that's a real credit to Dawson Senior, and he's so strict and diligent on getting that structure right, and he makes no apologies for it. And I suppose probably a lot of good sheep that people thought were good sheep had been culled in the past in the breeding program. Maybe a little bit too hard in some instances, but in saying that, you've got to look at where they are now, and their feet are quite good now. They're just about where we want them. Their shoulders have neatened up beautifully, top lines, strong head, strong bone, and the depth of carcass is really coming through the last probably 4 or 5 years. And the wool has gradually come off. That was probably the last trait that was of main focus, just because it wasn't really a problem. But as time's gone on, people want a more cleaner looking animal, so we've had to turn that dial up a bit more and pull the wool off them. But no, quite happy where the ultralight sits now. And then we add in the HF Plus gene, which I think was around 14, 15. And here we are today.
We'll stay in the breeding bit, and then we'll head into the management. But yeah, I guess one of the challenges with some of the shedding breeds has been just that reproductive rate, and often way that's sort of counted is mating them more than annually, and that there's got a couple of reasons people tend to do that. And I know that I've heard Dawes talk about if they do it on an annual cycle, the ewes just get too fat and it's sort of inefficient. Obviously, you're in a very Mediterranean environment, so that's got some challenges, and we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the things that happened about when you were joining was the GDF9 gene, which we're calling the HF Plus gene, the Hillcroft Farms Plus gene, which is a reproductive gene. And it's taken a long time, as you can imagine. You've got to bring a gene in from a Texel Coopworth cross, which kind of has none of the characteristics that you want in your sheep except the gene. so the HF Pluses have had
very true
a long journey, but it was awesome this year when we're going through them, and I'm sure again when we go through them again later on in the year that they're now pretty much on ultra-white type, and a lot of that wool's come off. There's a few things that have seemed to have come along for the ride, like a little bit of worm resistance maybe, and but the whole idea, I guess, was, and I remember when Dawson was talking to me about wanting a gene, and I was never a major fan of the major reproductive genes because they kind of all ended up in litters of lambs and trouble and whatever, whereas when I found out about GDF, or not this version of the GDF9 gene, I got quite excited and made sure Dawson got what he was after, and so we got him over to WA. It's been a long journey, but you've now got enough numbers where you can kind of say, well, this is roughly what it's doing, and pretty exciting scanning results this year for a fairly early joining. So it's not when they would be at its best, but just talk us through kind of what we're starting to see in that HF Plus line.
Yeah, well, really this HF Plus gene, which is what we're calling it for simplicity's sake, was on the back of your recommendation for back in, I know, 2014, 15, maybe 15, 16, somewhere around there. Yeah, and it was interesting because I remember Dawes telling me the story when he first started the ultralights. He mentioned it to you, and you were a bit like, "Oh, geez, what are you doing?" type thing. I mean, I don't mean to bash you on your own podcast.
I've admitted that plenty of times. We've got one up. We've got one on each other at Dawson and I, so it's kind of fine. He's been wrong once, and I've been wrong once. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no,
exactly.
Only once too for both of you. It's quite remarkable. Yeah, but in saying that, you've sort of then seen where it's going and where it could do, and where it needed to probably go, to be honest. And that's where this gene came along. But yeah, like you said, no disrespect to any other breed, the Texel, Coopworth, whatever was in that mix. It just wasn't what we wanted for our system. And you put a gene that you want the gene, but you don't want really much of what's come with it, and it takes a long time to get right. And to be honest, we're still fixing it. It's still not 100% where we want it yet. It's all trending in the right direction, and they've made leaps and bounds, and even in the last 2 years, the quality of the sheep. But it's you got to then really fix up the structure, and you lose a bit of production, a fair bit of production initially, and then you slowly get that back, and then you try and accelerate to get this gene has 1 or 2 copies. One copy gives you up to 20% more lambs, and 2 copies can be up to 45%. So you're trying to get more double copies, but the more extreme with those double copies, you sort of bring in more of those traits that you don't want. So sometimes you've got to take 2 steps backwards to go 1 step forward again, and that's been the progression of it for probably the first 5 to 7 years of it breed, and now you look at it now, and it's tracking pretty much on par with the ultralights in terms of genetic gain each year. So that's positive. They've still got to fix up a few things here and there to make them on par with the straight ultralights, but it's only because those ultralights are just getting better and better each year. But the gap is certainly closing, and fertility wise, it's looked promising for about 5 years. We've seen on a commercial level, but at the moment, it's pretty useful, to be honest with you, especially with the accelerated lambing. So we're probably seeing anywhere from we'll probably be up at least a good 20%, 25% between the two breeds easy in terms of overall conceptions. So in some instances, and even seeing a bit of an effect from the size. So if we use HF plus rams on these just straight ultralights, we see a lift as opposed to just an ultralight on an ultralight. So I know we shouldn't do. I know the literature says we shouldn't see that, but it's probably 7-8% increase just there.
Yeah, I think that's that's been, and we have found that. I remember the first time we used the gene in merinos in New Zealand. Again, Ernst Clue went the other way. There's a few people have gone the other way, put the wool on, and you've gone to take it off them. But I remember when it was actually Richard Subtle and his stock manager at the time kind of said that they'd just split the ewes on the gate and put the carrying rams in with one and the non-carriers in with another group, and had seen this lift in scanning. I'm like, yeah, you're dreaming. And then, but it keeps happening. So it's got to be embryo survival. Like, it's the only mechanism it can be. The ovulations obviously aren't controlled by the ram, but so it must be having an impact on embryo survival, which is remarkable and awesome. So which is something that we don't. That was definitely a free lunch that we didn't expect coming. And it'd be good to. I guess we've got enough numbers around us now where we always wanted to have someone like a new version of you, Josh, have an honest student come out of Murdoch and kind of analyse this data and have a really good look into it. And that's sort of probably where we've got to now. It's sort of where we've got enough animals where we can properly set up that sort of study, or at least look into the data properly and spend a bit of time looking through it. But it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. For so long you play around with, 20 ewes here, 30 ewes here. Oh, geez, we're up to 50, 60 ewes this year. We'll get a bit of a look. But really it's all so minute in the scheme of things. But now you get up to 500, 700 odd ewes with varying degrees of single, double copies and no copies. And, you can really start to see some trends now. And it's funny, a lot of things with genetics are the same, and this is not too dissimilar. You're just clicking there. It's like a clock. Going around. You take forever to get to 12 o'clock, and then 12 o'clock hits, and you go, well, what next? And it just hasn't moved. It hasn't moved. The next thing you go to 2 o'clock, and you go, well, when did that happen? And I guess a bit of that happened this
particularly
year.
in the night time, not the daytime, mate.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And but no, it was a bit like that, to be honest with you. There's a few years where you're a bit disheartened, to be honest. You sort of were hoping to see, why hasn't it moved? But genetic gain isn't always linear sometimes. Sometimes it plateaus and then it kicks again, and always trending in the right direction. But, sometimes you're a bit impatient. You want to see it yesterday instead of tomorrow. And but this year we've just, on the back of last year, and just looking back from our scanning figures from the last 2 years, the increase in overall fertility across both breeds, but also in the HF plus is really starting to move now.
Yeah, wasn't till I think last year or maybe the year before when we had it's probably only last year, we had the classic screen running and going through those sheep, and you'd see a 5,000 number come through, or a different colour tag in them. And you look at their repro data, and obviously it doesn't know that slam plan doesn't have a clue what gene they've got carrying or not, but they'd always be they'd always lift by that 15 or 20%, that sort of go from whatever, but the NLW would be up in the top part of the flock, and you're like, right, this thing's working, because obviously if the computer's found it, and if the EBVs have found it, or the breeding Vs have found it, then it's obviously clearly there in the data. We just haven't sort of had the time or patience to look through it properly. But you're 100% right that it takes so long it feels like it's taking forever. Then all of a sudden you have these little breakthrough moments, and sometimes it's a sire that breaks a correlation that you didn't think you had, or sometimes it's just a couple of sires that, they're a little bit lower in that worms, and that allows you to go that next level on that trait. Or, but it's, there's lots of days where you're thinking this should be happening and it's not, and then other days you're going, wow, this is too easy. We're geniuses. This is working beautifully. But
The problem is, but sometimes, Mark, you get a result like we did this year. And I'll just quote it. Like we did a single sign mating on these HF Plus studs this year. Last year, I think it was on a single sign mating as well, and they did 163% scanning percentage, and you thought, okay, that's useful, but that's sort of the minimum. We kind of don't want them to drop below if this is going to be a high fertility. We want to push. And then this year it jumps to nearly 192, and you sort of go, well, hang on, what? And, the downside of that is if it drops below that next year, it's going to be like, well, what did we do wrong?
Downside for the manager, mate. The person who's in charge of the sheep.
Yeah, I know. I might be at the door, so this might be the first and last of you see. But yeah, I mean, you just get that. But what we are seeing consistently is the progression from reduced amount of singles and more multiples. That's undoubtedly consistent over the last probably 5 years, but in particular the last 2 years, really noticeable that, our twin percentages started off at around 42% and 24% for these HF pluses, and this year they're about 60% on the twins, and we've now got about 15% triplets running for them as well. So it's doesn't seem to be going much past that. I mean, we sort of get to that 14% triplets, which is a good thing, especially in our system. They're a bit of a pain, to be honest, to have that many triplets with the 3 and 2, but especially when 2 out of those 3 lambings is in not ideal conditions. So, and I think that was a big attraction to this gene. We didn't want, quads and all that sort of thing. We didn't want as many as we wanted. We just wanted as consistent amount of multiples each joining, each lambing. So the gene seems to be certainly working in that respect.
Yeah, and that's the joy, and that's why I got excited about it, because we didn't. Yeah, triplets and quads aren't super exciting, but if we can, it's kind of lifts. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it seems to lift it as you naturally would, selecting for fertility without, or selecting for fecundity without going nuts and just having multiple ovulations regardless of condition. I guess what we need to learn is kind of how it does respond to nutrition, and it seems like it probably is still responsive to nutrition. Like some of the repro genes kind of just work regardless of what you feed them almost, which is the dangerous ones, because then you've got skinny sheep that are having triplets or whatever, and that's a debacle. Whereas if this one stays linked to nutrition and they have the capacity to have more lambs, but if you don't feed them very well, they won't have those lambs. That's kind of got some benefits in the sense it's got some natural biological breaks, which is good. But yeah, it'd be interesting how it plays out. With the accelerated lambing, you've been at the helm trying to implement that on the ground. That you're in a environment where it'll be nice and green and lovely for 6 months, and then pretty dry and crispy for the other 6 months, or variations around that. But that's a very Mediterranean climate there in WA. Yeah, I guess over the years, talk through the ways you've sort of built feed systems or feeding systems to try and get that accelerated lambing working in your environment.
Yeah, the 6 months of green feed would be nice. It seems to be getting less and less each year, and later breaks, earlier finishes, but that's not an us problem. That's I think that's everyone's experiencing the same, so we're all in the same boat there. Yeah, I don't know when we started, probably 2019. We started this, maybe 2020, maybe in 2020 we started the accelerated lambing on the back of advice from a sort of a part-time sheep consultant that we were using. And not yourself here. I don't want to drop you in this and give you.
I don't consider myself part-time, mate, so I wasn't going in there. But, yeah.
Well, good. I was about to say I don't want to disrespect you anymore on your podcast.
First,
yeah, well, last, but anyway, it was sold to us, 3 and 2. You lamb them in March, and that you again lambs again in sort of November, December, and then sure lamb again in that late July, August. And yeah, like you mentioned before, we did have a bit of a problem with ewes going over fat, especially in the spring. And this sort of breed, once you get that fat and that fat layer, it doesn't take much to maintain it. especially if you've got good stubbles ahead of you and whatnot. So, and you can get these sheep too fat, and it can have a negative impact on fertility. We found that in 24 when one mob that were in really good nick at joining, probably a touch to them, but then we flushed them, because that's what you do. You got to push them, and scanning percentage was way down on the year before. It just didn't work, as opposed to the second mob of studs we did, which were probably a touch below where they needed to be perfectly honest, but we flushed them and got a really good result. That's that rising planar nutrition curve, which everyone sort of knows about. But yeah, the 3 and 2, it's challenging. We didn't really know how to implement it, to be honest with you, and neither did this consultant, if I'm being brutally honest. It was, how good is this? We're going to get 1.5 lambs a year out of instead of the one. But the March lambing is a great time to lamb, but it's a bit of a bugger at times. Trying not to curse too much here. It can be a bugger in that April-May period. Just the ewes just milk, put so much into the lamb, and the ewes can get quite down in condition. I know you might find that hard to believe, but it does happen very much so. So that's a challenge. The November-December lambing, as time's gone on, has proved a bit challenging at lambing, just because of not so much in the singles, but the multiples. If we get a really hot spell in the middle of lambing, like this year, we had 6 days over 40 degrees in December, right smack bang in the middle of their lambing, and our multiple mortality was a lot higher than what it normally is, and that's the thing I probably want to emphasise. It's not all beers and skittles. You can have some real misses. When we first started, we didn't quite have our management quite right in terms of the joinings, and we paid the price. We went from 93-95% conception rate each year on year, and then we went straight down to 80% in the first year. Bloody hell, what do we do wrong? This is not what we was told. But we needed to get a lot better at what we were doing, not just feed wise. If you're getting an extra lambing out of that ewe in 2-year period, you're decreasing the amount of minerals that they've been taking in, so you had to improve that. A lot more management on worm egg counts and things like that. But these sheep are pretty good. They've got a bit of natural resistance and can handle it anyway. But it's just a lot of little things you have to do right to get back up. So, we sort of thought, sometimes it's impossible to join when the lambs are at foot. Again, you're only getting 82% conception rate there, and that's not good enough. So what do we do there? We rip all the lambs off. Yep, delayed joining, and right over. And then we got up to 87% foot. It's getting better. But then this year, that last joining in February, we had the lambs on foot for the whole period of joining, and we're back up to 92, 93%. Some mobs up to 95%. So it's funny how your perception changes over time with what you think you can do and what you can actually do, and it's just trying to find out what works in your system. And our system will be very different to the bloke next door and be different to the person down the street. And but it's just trying to find what works in your system. But a big part of that is going harder on the fertility on the ewes, those repeat dries. Have a bit of a policy now that if you dry twice in your life, you're gone. And that can sometimes be a bit harsh on some of those multiple ewes that have reared in that, that summer-autumn feed gap, and then we've tried to get them in for November lambing, but there's plenty that do it still. And once you start screwing down on that bottom 25%, everything starts to lift. And it's not an overnight success. It takes probably, I reckon, 3 years to really see that come through. But accelerated lambing means you can fast-track that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, and put that pressure on. And I think you're right. I interviewed Richard Green about he will go on just before this podcast, I think, and he was talking about how, like, implementing technology, how you always need, the only way you ever make money out of technology is the system change that goes with it, and I think that's true with kind of genetics. You can't just, or sometimes you make selection. You have to change your system to make the most of the new opportunity that's been created by the genetics sometimes, and that's an interesting kind of rabbit hole we could go down, which we won't. We'll stick in the management of this stuff. But I know that sort of baleage or wrapped silage was tried, and then pit silage. So trying to get something that's semi-digestible that isn't just straight grain feeding. And so, yeah, silage, is that still part of the game, the silage production?
Yeah, very much so. So, yeah, trialled the bales for, might have been a couple of years, I reckon. Might have started this about four years ago. Maybe this might be our 5th year. But it was just, bales were very labour intensive to feed out, cut and wrap, cut and string, putting it in wagons and feeding it out. So then we went to pit silage about 2 years ago, I reckon, and chopped, pressed in a pit for 6 to, I suppose, 8 weeks to it cured and then feed it out. And that's been a big game changer. It's probably half to third, probably a third of the time it takes to feed it out now. And they clean it up a lot better. And we've probably improved the nutritional value from that as well. Again, that's another learning experience. What we first started with silage wasn't great, and we had to get our pasture mix right. Cateweed doesn't make the best silage, Mark.
Cateweed doesn't make anything good, mate.
Had to get that under control. Yeah. It looks green, but so once we started to get that under control, we started to get some pretty useful feed values out of that silage. So it's just under 11 megs now and sitting around that 15 to 17% crude protein. So it's pretty good stuff. One thing we have noticed with feeding the silage is the sheep are a lot more content. They just seem to be ruminating a lot more, chewing the cud a lot more. You go out to the mobs and they're half settled. They run up to you, don't get me wrong, when you feed it out, but they're not under your tyres or their tractor and things like that trying to get to it. They're just, and even when you're handling them and whatnot, it really has quietened them down and settled. And then, with our confinement setup, which got set up last year only, we just looked at it for a couple of years, a bit on the fence about it, and I'll put my hand in that too. I was a bit on the fence. Is confinement really that good? Can it really lift production and make it that easy, as everyone says? And after 1 year, big fan of it, especially on pregnant ewes now. So we probably feed majority of their diet is silage with some barley to top up the energy needs of them sheep going into that later pregnancy stage. So so that's worked really well. And you can drive around the confinement pens, and half the time they just look at you now, and they're not too bothered. They're not at the gate or the trough belt screaming at you. So it does take a lot longer to feed out than just running out a auger, and driving along the trough. But I think it's a lot cheaper to produce than just buying in hundreds of tons of grain each year too. So it's a balance, and it's got to work for your system too. So it wouldn't be for everyone, but for us it seems to be working. Yeah,
excellent. And it's a pretty cool containment set up there. It's played to Dawson Jr.'s strength of building stuff. Nothing like a construction project.
Oh yeah, played to his few strengths there, building it in 5 minutes, and But no, I mean, full credit to him. It was to be honest with you, it was a prick of a paddock that he picked, but it was the best location, just in terms of closeness and whatnot. And he had an idea. He put it to some earth moving people and said, "This is roughly what I want it to look like." And hasn't been too many misses with it. There's a few things we would change if we could do it differently, but not major. And I've really enjoyed just being able to look over 4,500 ewes quite easily and see what's going. Confinement does provide other animal health challenges that you've got to be onto, and hygiene's a big one. But overall, the benefits far outweigh any of the negatives. And you've got all your sheep more or less in one spot, except for those that are lambing out of season, so they're obviously out in paddocks.
Excellent. If we swing back kind of to McGilchrist and your honours, because he'd like being mentioned twice, but
oh, Jesus, here we go.
Well, we won't talk about him, but we'll talk about eating quality. Obviously, the last few years, we've been working hard to make sure the reference population for ultra whites is all set up for having genomic inferred IMF and shear force, something that's pretty important to Hillcroft business. They're very much a meat production business and a quality meat production business. And so, it's been a real joy, I think, to start bringing some of those phenotypes. You've been in charge of getting some of those lambs, or all of those lambs probably, ready to go to the works. It's enjoyable to start seeing some of this eating quality work come through into the sheep as well.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. And to be honest with you, Mark, we've only been starting probably 2 years ago on it, if we're being perfectly honest. Before then, we were just playing around with it, really, and I think this works. I'm not sure. But, you know, it is when you're doing based on genomic values, sometimes you're shooting not completely into the dark, but there is an element of unknown. And do I sacrifice that much growth and production for good eating quality? And, I mean, you're part of it. Last year we did an eating quality trial, and we actually got some data associated to size to try and get some more actual values rather than just genomic. And that really opened our eyes to just the variation in mob. Yeah, so clearly we want sheep that grow and yield well. That's a non-negotiable. You know, that's what we essentially still get paid for, and all the producers get paid for in the meat game. But we don't want to discount this eating quality. I think at a point in time it will be there, and there will be a premium. And I know there already is over east, but you know, it might take 10 years, it might take 15 before we see it over here. But if it's in the background and it's not sacrificing too much on your production, and you get those curve benders which have got really good eating quality but a good production, we start channeling that line. Well, it's there waiting for us when we can reap the rewards in whenever that is. But yeah, just the variation in your teams, and also notice that with this the Lamix carcass comp which we entered, just the huge variation we got in some of our sire and lambs. You know, we had one lamb that was a bit over 8% for IMF, and yet our worst lamb was probably around the 4%. You know, so there's huge variation, and we're trying to produce a consistent product. So over time, as we become more consistent with our selection for those eating quality traits, that will hopefully just improve. But yeah, you know, like all things, you know, you pick on one thing, but it sometimes brings down something else. And growth and production generally in the past have suffered from going towards more eating quality, and that was quite evident in my honours. But yeah, those curve benders push it in the right direction, and that's where you need a channel. And if you're not measuring and you're not using ASBVs, I don't know how you can do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, really good points. And I think, yeah, you make a good point there that we need to, it's as much about taking out that bad end of the curve, and so we can be more consistent, so tighten them up so that they all eat the same is kind of what is the holy grail, I suppose, because every consumer out there they don't know that that's just, they got a bad one. They just know that whatever that was, they don't want to eat again, so they'll move away from that product. So,
yeah, very true.
Yeah, it is interesting to how we incorporate it going forward, but the power of having some fresh phenotypes fed into that genomic reference population, so that we can be, when we're looking at a shear force breeding ASBV or an IMF ASBV in the yards, we can feel with a bit of confidence that we can put some weight on that. The other trait that we've sort of put a bit of heat on in the last few years is worm egg count, and something that I think we've probably seen there, and we see other places. Once it kind of feels like it takes a while to make it move, but when it starts moving, it moves quite quickly, and all of a sudden we get quite a few negative animals, and like as in the animals in the right way, and we can actually lock that in pretty quickly, which I think we're starting to see already.
Yeah. Again, a bit like the IMF, we never really had problems with worms. So if you don't have a problem with it in your system, why focus on it? You know, that's very basic thinking sometimes. You know, you're trying to fix up other things that you know you need to fix up. But, you know, ultimately, probably 3-4 years ago, people started asking about, well, what are your worm values? You know, what because they're trying to compare. If they're making the switch, they want to know what they're getting, and that's fair enough. You know, people are paying good money for rams these days. They need as much accurate information as possible. So yeah, about 3 years ago, started the joyous task of collecting fecal egg counts and all of that. And yeah, for the first year, you sort of go nowhere. You know what I mean? You sort of just trying to get a feel of where your range is. Second year, you start to be able to remove those poorer, badder types and animals. And then in the third year, you start to get a bit of momentum. And then again, I think when you were here back in February, we started noticing, especially in the HF Plus, is like, okay, they've got a bit of natural worm resistance and that, but it's really moved a lot in a short space of time. And it's one of your famous quotes: if you can measure it, you can move it. And it's so bloody true, I mean, you don't really realise that until you actually do it firsthand. And we've even seen in our ultra rides, it really, without the gene, it's really pulling that down too. But, in the past, growth and production and structure were the forefront, and rightly so, and they still very much are. But now, if it's got great growth, great muscle, but is plus 70 for worms, I don't think we'll use it.
Not with me in the yards anyway.
So, oh, believe me, you're not the only one. But it's two-way street. It's not just the size. You've got to look at your ewes. And, we had some very, very high E-count ewes, or high ASBV ewes that were not what we wanted if we wanted to move it. And we could really move it a lot faster if we were just focusing on it, but we just don't want to sacrifice growth and production. It's got to be a gradual build. And to be honest with you, that's been Dawson Senior's philosophy, just a gradual build, get and maintain that consistency. And with more data and using ASBVs, you do get there. It might take you a little bit longer, but you don't have the inconsistencies. And who knows? Maybe next year we'll screw it down even harder if we feel like the production's is pretty stable, and it seems to be now more and more so each year. So, then that's where the power of ASBVs and data comes into it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well said, mate. We better wrap it up. This will be going out, I reckon, on the morning before LAMX. So we're chatting now, but in a couple of weeks we're going to be on our way to Adelaide. So looking forward to catching up there. Before we close this one down, you've mentioned a few people you've worked with in the past. Your dad, Pete, Dawson. There might be others. I guess the question we ask at the end of the podcast is, who's the best human you've had the opportunity to learn from?
Yeah, well, it's a bloody good question, this one, Ferg. I must admit, like many, I've probably got a few, but probably for the constant throughout my life has been my nunno or granddad in Italian. He taught me a lot about how to treat people. I mean, I was never really a bad bastard, to be honest, but
that's not something I've ever heard said about you, mate. No.
Yep. But at times a bit selfish and probably didn't treat people with the same awareness as I should have. And throughout my life, he's just been onto that about, you at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens, as long as people still want to, shake your hand and say good day to you down the street type thing. You can have your differences, and that's fine. Be respectful, and that his advice 15 years ago when I started working to now is still just as relevant. So he's been a massive influence on that side. I'd be reminiscent not to mention Dawson Senior and all this, but he's been probably the biggest influence on my sheep knowledge and career thus far, and he's so generous with his time and knowledge, even when he doesn't realise it. He just oozes knowledge, and there'd be very few better to probably learn off in terms of how to build an animal and genetics, and his views aren't always popular, but he's probably got the credentials to think what he thinks is right, and it's hard not to respect that, and I've really enjoyed working and still really enjoy working and learning off him. So he's been another big one. I don't want to mention him a third time, but Peter McGilchrist probably had to be in there. And it's funny, he took me on. I was at UWA, he's at Murdoch. There was no reason to take me on, but he thought, oh, well, young fella, give him a crack type thing. And he imparted a lot of confidence into me. He sort of backed me to say, you are good enough to do this. And, your thinking isn't, just because you're young and inexperienced doesn't mean your thinking is wrong. Just back yourself. And I find a lot of those lessons have been very useful, especially today, when you're going down a rabbit hole, and especially this 3 and 2 and management decisions you make, is it right, is it not? But he did impart a lot of self-confidence. So I've got to thank him. But probably the most important person is probably my wife. I can't really go past her. She's been a big part of my life, probably half my life now, and had to do the 10-year apprenticeship to make sure she was right. But it's not easy being a wife of someone in this industry, as you know, and certainly probably not easy being my wife at times. But she's been outstanding and a constant support and very understanding and very lucky to have her in my life, Mark. So I'd probably say she's number one.
Perfect, mate. Great combination there of family and business, and awesome. Some really, really great pointers in there that anyone that's kind of a future Josh in the wings can take on that self-confidence and back yourself. That kind of stuff is definitely required. And Pete's a great one for bringing the best out in people. Righto, we'll close it down there, mate. Next time we see you, we'll be having a beer at Lamex.
Yeah, looking forward to when we get there, Mark.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and thanks again to our 3 fantastic sponsors. Heinegger, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Allflex Livestock Intelligence, part of MSD Animal Health, offer extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. ProWay Livestock Equipment offer turnkey solutions from design through to professional installation and specialise in facilities that are tailored to your specific operation for all livestock species. We thank these 3 great companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.